It is my honor, pleasure, and duty to begin this new season of Difficult Dialogues.
Hello, my name is Dr. Demetria Shabazz, and I'm here with my co-host, Amilcar Shabazz, Dr. Amilcar Shabazz, and this is another installment of Difficult Dialogues here at Amherst Media. We have been, since Juneteenth, that's June 19th, we have been focusing on the subject of reparations for Black people, and we have several in a series, and this is another exciting installment having to do with reparations. And we see reparations in many ways, culturally, economically, educationally. And so here we're going to explore how that might look through the eyes of two young entrepreneurs. So I will hand it off to the other Dr. Shabazz.
Sante Sana, thank you. And it's my pleasure to welcome and to say Akwaba to our guests here on Difficult Dialogues. This public affairs program, for the many years it's been going now, really tries to open a space for folks who live here in the Connecticut River Valley, or who pass through, who come through for different reasons, to create a space for engaging some of the difficult topics of the day. Reparations, the struggle for reparative justice being one of those. But before getting into that, I would just like, in welcoming you to the space, just ask you all to introduce yourselves as you would want us to know.
Peace, y'all. I'm D.W. McCraven. My pronouns are they, them, and I'm one half of Counter Culture Educator.
I am Kinga McCraven, pronouns she, they. I'm also part of the other half of Counter Culture Educator, and interdisciplinary artist, entrepreneur, student of life, always creator, constantly creating.
Oh, so you went in, so I'm going to give a little bit more about
that's just who I am.
Right, so also like an interdisciplinary artist as well. We share that vibe. The work that we do is in helping turn around the culture of communities, one authentic relationship at a time. And we do that through artistic expression, community engagement, self-care, and play. So that can look like many different things in many different ways. And we're still discovering that because our business is so fresh. It was just based off our experiences of, we know some things. People always ask us the things we know. What if we put those things down and we're able to provide tools for people to know the things we know and how we interact in the community and build relationships with other people? Because it seems to have helped support our life for the many years that we've been doing it, and people have asked for us to do it in many different forms and many different places. So why not do it in the way that we would like?
Fantastic. As I understand, both of you spent time here in the Valley before now, perhaps grew up in the Valley, I think Pelham or wherever else. Could you speak on that a little bit, your roots here, and then kind of where you've been before coming back here?
Sure. I grew up in Pelham and went to Pelham Elementary from kindergarten all through 6th grade. Pelham is a very small school. So out of 120 kids, I was in the same classroom with the same kids, K through 6th grade, and was one of maybe a handful of kids of color in the school. And then I transitioned into the middle school and the high school from there, into Amherst. And so that's where I grew into the Amherst community more. I left for university to go to Temple in Philadelphia for 2 years and studied dance over there. and had to come back home. That was Temple. Temple was rough. Philly was rough, and I had a heartbreak with my love dance when I was there. There was some new things coming into my life about how to approach that, and so I came back here to UMass because UMass has a program where you can build your own major, and so I was able to do a more creative combination of cultural studies through dance, tradition, and movement, and that more so fitted what I was doing. So I came back to UMass for a few years. That's where I met my wife, and then we moved to Chicago together and lived there for 5 years, where I focused a lot on body art. I started my body art business, Root of Five, which we did festivals all over, actually all over Illinois, and did some tours through New England area as well, and also was doing a lot of education in theater and in dance. And I was in school program, out of school programming, but a lot of that was through outreach artistic organizations that were bringing arts education to the public schools in Chicago, because that wasn't something that they had. So that was Chicago, and then we moved back here a few years ago in 2017. And since then, I've been working on more of my business skills. And so Root of Five actually ended up coming to a close because I started to work on organizing and operations when it comes to business. And I started to work with small business owners in organizing their operations and creating systems and automations and things like that. And so we both have a lot of different skills, and that's how we got into Counter Culture Educator, because, you know, it's all coming together. Do you want to share a little bit more about it?
Before that though, Root of Five, what does Root of Five mean?
Root of Five comes from the 5 elements of hip hop. The 5th element in our philosophy being knowledge of self, knowledge of community, knowledge of history. And so Root of Five came from, you know, knowing who you are, knowing what you're doing, and sharing that knowledge. And that's a huge part of all the artistic work that we do. So while I was doing body art, I was doing face paint, henna, and makeup. And I was really into kind of just knowing the roots of that and talking about where that comes from culturally.
Right. So I think that to add to that, having cultural reference.
Yeah.
Having cultural framing of the work that you're doing, always keeping that in mind, that it comes from somewhere, and not being part of the erasure that often happens whenever other people are exploring different cultures, but keeping that rooted element of hip hop that we know so well and that we taught in hip hop theater, because Kinga mentioned theater, but we taught specifically hip hop theater.
That's true. So
how that blends into all the things that we do. All right.
And how about you in Chicago and then transitioning back here?
I'm wanting to encapsulate this. Do you just want to know about my experience in Chicago and then being here, or before?
Just kind of finishing out the story.
What happened before?
Yeah, I'm just picking up where the story had gone. Take it away.
Take it away, right? Because we have very different experiences up until Chicago. So, you know, I was a Crocker Farm graduate, a middle school transitionee, and then an Amherst High School graduate as well. My experience was in athletics. And also my experience was with, the first time I really remember being seen in Amherst was through Project 2050, which was a now defunct company, New World Theater. And it was the first time that I had actually seen people that looked like me who were doing this work. And that's how I really got introduced into hip hop culture and understanding like, oh, it's not just rap, but then understanding that this is a whole culture and it has elements. And these things are ignored because the underground of hip hop is ignored, and really where a lot of that movement is happening, but people just elevate, or maybe like people through an institution lens, they co-opt what they want to co-opt, right? And so when we talk about Root of Five, how do we not just co-opt something? How do we know where these things come from, and how, when we're moving with people, we're carrying that as well, right? So, or carrying the history. So my transition, I personally, like my undergrad work was in New York. So I spent time, maybe 5 or 6 years in New York. And then I came back here and was doing, and then I was always doing mentorship, right? Mentorship and being involved with young people. I was a collegiate athlete. So, you know, it was a lot of these things cross over, whether I was teaching young people how to play basketball or athletics. I did personal training. I was a personal trainer for a bit and strength conditioning coach in New York. And then I did volunteer work as mentors in like Washington Heights and stuff like that. So those things have always been a part of I feel like who we are, to just be like, this is our community and how do we exist within our community and how are we making sure we're building relationships with people that feel, again, authentic or are authentic in nature and that come from a place of care. So from that transition from New York, then we met. I was doing program development here as well, artistic program development, and creating programs for a couple of different organizations before we left to Chicago. And I transferred some of that work over, and for whatever reason, that didn't work out.
Was part of that with New World Theater when you were here?
Did I?
Was part of the work with New World Theater, or
yes,
had it already gone defunct?
It was a little bit yes and no, because New World Theater was kind of on a downward trend, let's say, but I'd spent some time working with those rising youth, right? So I had worked with them and I was working with another organization, and I was working with a couple of different organizations doing different projects. Most of them were building the programs from the ground up. So recruiting the young people, engaging with the communities, engaging with their parents, engaging with whatever community I was in. So if I was in Springfield, I was engaging. If I was in Chicopee, I was engaging. So I was creating these processes, having these dialogues with young people about, what do you need? What do you want? How can I serve you? Right? Rather, you know, just kind of meeting young people, meeting the community from that space. And then that's when we met and we traveled to Chicago. And it's kind of just continuing that work of, Kinga had an opportunity to be, I was working in another space with young people that I didn't particularly enjoy. It was in a really
nurturing space.
Yeah, it was a really wonderful space. Like I would say it was a really wonderful space because it had a lot of culture around it, specifically Mexican culture. So I was like in the little village area of Chicago, and I was working there, but there's also a lot of things that were happening, a lot of conflict that was happening when I was there, and a lot of things that just changed the way I looked at the world. And so there's some experiences that were like, whoa, that just happened. Someone, you know, the first 2 weeks we got to Chicago, I was involved in a shootout. And like, I wasn't doing the shooting, like, I'm not obviously, but I wasn't doing the shooting, but I was walking down the street. And some of the youth that I was working with had made some decisions that they thought were going to end up well. And it didn't end up well for them. And so I'm so glad that nobody died, but it just changed my lens. You know, even being in New York, but every experience just really changed my lens of, how do I want to be in relationship with people? Yeah. What is it that we really need? How do we really want to move? And so from then, Kinga would have opportunities. She's like, you know, I know you're really good at behavior management, so let's come in and do this work. So we started to pair that together. And then when we had opportunities to teach together, we would do that. And if we didn't have the opportunity to teach together, we would create it. Oh, y'all want to just hire one of us? We're going to create a co-teaching situation here. So it's also, we're very into where people see walls, we build bridges. It's like nothing is impossible.
We create our own opportunities.
Right. And so that's what we started to do. And that's how we got to mentorship. I did mentorship with working through the city of Chicago with on the South and West sides. We did some work teaching there. So we were very well traveled within the different areas of Chicago. And we learned a lot. We learned a lot about programming, about ways of being, and how people can show up in a community that really benefits them, and how they can show up and create harm.
Sound like you both have a very wonderful approach to working with people, especially young people, one that really builds the individual's own sense of self-confidence, takes them from where they are to where they want to go. Is that that you've both developed and learned through experience? Is there also some other particular sources you reference for how you've developed that particular type of practice?
That's a wonderful question. And something that we've been talking about a lot these past couple of weeks in uncovering, the story that we want to tell and be attached to Counter Culture Educator. And one of the things that has come up a lot is that, when you are somebody who has experienced not being seen and welcome and accepted into spaces, or denied your power, silenced, especially if being two Black queer women, we are femmes, we experience a lot of different layers of oppression with all the different intersectionalities. And we have completely different experiences coming together in a relationship, whether that be our personal relationship of being in marriage, and on top of that in business comes a lot of complexities as well with dealing with those traumas together, working as a team. And so I think, honestly, a lot of that has come from our own experiences and knowing what it is like to not be seen and to not be heard, and realizing just how important that is. Because also, as Black femmes, we have been, it's been ingrained in us to have a nurturing energy. And when we tap into that and we offer that to the people around us, we really started to see how that was a quality that improved our work. It was not just a piece of who we are. Of course, it's a piece of who we are, but it also was a quality that improved our work, that can be identified and can be named and can be packaged and can be replicated if we actually pay attention to the technology that's being used and to the skills and the systems that we've developed. And so I think that that's one of the major sources that I've identified.
Mm-hmm. I want to maybe just add, I'm thinking about, okay, let me just say, as far as when I think about credentials, right? And I always, before coming into Counter Culture Educator, I was like, make sure people know I have a master's degree. Make sure people know I have a bachelor's degree. And, I've done countless work in kinesiology and science. I was really into the institutionalized way of being.
Yeah.
The way of presenting information of, let me put my degree on it. Because without my degree, I'm nothing, right? And that's really how I thought. And then walking into Counter Culture Educator, I wanted to be purposeful about, because what I had learned from my experiences is that, yeah, I know about restorative justice. Yes, I know about Indigenous circle process. Yes, I know about program development. Yes, I know about management. Yes, I know about all these different things. However, when I walked into different spaces and every other person had degrees too, they weren't carrying the work the way that I was carrying it, right? So there was different ways that people were going about it. Not saying that we were all different, right? We had all embraced the work differently. It's kind of like a psychologist who goes to school and learns about trauma, but never considers racial trauma. Mm. So you're going to interact with Black and brown people and you don't know about racial trauma, to know that them actually walking into the door, they're already carrying something. Right. And they're never going to be able to give that to you if you don't recognize it. And how important that is specifically for people who are identified as white in the world, to understand that people are carrying these things. And so it's almost like the invisible soul killers. And when we walked into these institutions, these spaces, even not even in institutions, the places I would see that even lived in us and Black and brown people, of the ways we have been indoctrinated into the structure of whiteness and how that structure is so violent. And so I want to be clear, it's not about white people, it's about the structure of whiteness and how we're taught these ways of colonization and how this violence it's in us. And so the practice of freeing ourselves from that. And so those things, like the institution couldn't teach me that.
Right.
It didn't teach me how to free myself. It may have given me information, but it depends on the person who was giving the information. as to whether or not I can assess on how I could go about getting free. So when we walked into schools, we would have young people would respond to us more than they would respond to principals. And it's just, how does that happen? How does that happen then when we tell young people to get into a line and be ready to come in and get some of this joy today? That their response is, I can't show up today because this happened, but I still want to be in class. And our response is that you can't, not that you can't be here, but okay, well, this is what you can do. This is how you can continue to add to the class because we want you to be here because we know your spirit is valued. And thank you for wanting to spend your time with us because it's a gift. Institutions don't teach us that.
Yeah. And I'll just say, like, you'll never just hear me naming my credentials because I don't hold a lot of weight to that. And I've just never felt like the things that I've learned and the things that I carry come from the institutional education that I've received or any of the areas that seem to be validated and held as important in society. And so, I think that the most of what our learning has come from is our own healing. And when DW talks about a Project 2050 at a New World Theater, I was also a part of that. And I would say that a lot of our experience with healing stems from that space. And that is why I would say that that fifth element of knowledge in hip hop really stood out to us, because when you start to dive into yourself and your identity and you start to attach that to everything else that's happening in the world, and you have like these studies of all the different issues that are coming up in the world, and all the different movements, all the different ways that people are coming into liberation. I keep referring to the liberation of all people. That's the movement that we're in right now. We're seeing it in so many different ways. It's not just the movement for Black lives. It's also, you see, there's a movement for gender identity. There's a movement for global warming and for environmentality. There's so many different movements that are coming together. That's like the liberation of all people. And I think that when we are learning more about ourselves, tuning into ourselves, learning more about the world, what's going on around us, and making those connections, and whatever way you express that, it doesn't always come out as art. For us, it is most often art. For other people, it might be inventions, it might be business ideas, whatever it might be. But I think that spark that 2050 taught us of self-healing created a whole ripple of ways that we are studying people, studying the way that we are interacting, and how that ties back to our personal experiences and identities, and connecting with people authentically in what their personal experience is, and understanding that we all have different experiences. And that's, I think, a lot of the work, the self-work that we've done individually in healing.
Right. And I just want to add, when you talk about creative leaders, we're talking about people who are change makers, right? Who are agents of change, you could be an educator. We are so defined sometimes in the way that we are, that it's just like, oh, we're just going to be creative leaders. Oh, you're a parent and you're leading somebody. Mm-hmm. And you would like to have discussion about how you can show up for yourself. Let's have that conversation, right? Because if you're whoever's feeding themselves, and whoever's willing to be a change agent, that to me is a creative leader. That to us is a creative leader, right? So I just wanted to add to that.
That's really rich. I appreciate that. That's wonderful. I have to say as well, I have 3 sons. All 3 are artists, and the middle one was a teenager, and a few months before I got involved with the hiring process to come to UMass. So about a little less than a year before we eventually found our way here to UMass, we had gone to a meeting in New York City of the National Conference on Race and Ethnicity, NCORE, one of the NCORE, this big annual meeting. And I had my middle son with me, Amilcar, the second, the younger. And there was a session, we went through the program. I had some things to be at. I went through the program, got him a little tag, and also he could go to sessions as well. And one of the things we saw that was youth oriented that he was interested in was a session at NCORE of Project 2050. So he went to that. I came at the very end of it. I got out of my session and went to meet him at it. And so I caught a little bit of the Q&A, the discussion going on. But let me tell you, he came out of that so lit, so on fire, you know. And then when I told him later that, you know, we were looking at moving to UMass and all of that, and you know, remembered that that's where, you know, 2050 was. He was so excited. And then when we got here, 2050, New World Theater was all, you know, it was the beginning of the end. So it was unfortunate, but anyway, he found other things: Youth Action Coalition, Get Up, Get Down, working in the visual arts and public art making. That was also very powerful for him, and unleashed a lot of his creative energies that he's still very active with today. So I think this is the work. This is the liberatory. This is a great part of the liberatory work. But let's drill down a little more now into, you all mentioned a number of things, both personally that you confronted and you know, struggled with and healed from, in terms of, I heard things like silencing, invisibility, different kinds of phenomena that were things that did harm, did harm in the lives collectively of people, and also in your own lives. And there was a pushing through that had to occur. And it's part of then, as I see it, as your practice is sharing those tools with other people, especially other young people, and as they confront many of the same kinds of phenomena. How do you grab, I mean, where is that coming from? Where is that harm coming from? You know, I know you all are dealing with it from the arts and creatively. I deal with it as an historian. Dee deals with it as a communications scholar and media activist. Where is this harm, though, really coming from, and how how do we find ways to sustain ourselves in the fight against that which is producing this individual and collective harm?
Heavy.
I'm ready for this.
Go for it.
I'm ready.
Get it started.
So a couple of things popped up for me, and as a historian, you know, also knowing that history matters, and that's where our lineage, like understanding lineage and understanding where we come from, feeds what happens in the future, right? So if we're not understanding, for me, the understanding, what really clicked in my mind was, I literally was bred into violence. So when I talk about my lineage, and I talk about part of my lineage is having the generational violence that is transcended from understanding that lived in the bodies of my ancestors, right? And so when I say Native Black, the ancestors that were brought here, right? And then what were their exchange and what were their interactions that were with the people who were colonizing, which is the white colonizers? What was that interaction like? And there's nowhere that I've discovered that interaction was friendly. There's nowhere that I've discovered that it wasn't filled with violence, with rape and pillaging, and abuse, and physical abuse, and mental abuse, and the scarring, the stealing economically, the commodification of bodies. So in nowhere in that history can I trace back, for me, in being in the US, of a time when law and order existed, when colonizers came, that it was ever peaceful for anybody who looked like me. And so when I think about that, I think about how that's 400 or 500 years of this constant pressure this constant abuse of our minds and our bodies, I will spend a lifetime breaking and healing from those generational curses, from those habits that have been learned. I'll spend a lifetime working to undo that and heal myself. And part of that lifetime is making sure the next generation that comes after me understands it comes from some place. And we have to work. We have to know where it comes from. We have to know the history. You don't have to know everything, but you have to know enough to know how to heal.
Yeah, I think the other part of that is at the generation that we are at now, I have found that a lot of the times older generations like to remind repetitively the younger generation at hand, you know, whatever, like repetitively meaning each generation does this, likes to remind the generation that newer that things were worse before, you know, and that's so true in so many ways that it was more overt. And I think the way that things have become more covert and embedded and like sly and slick because it exists right in front of you in a way that is just not right in front of your face, and so extreme or vulgar or obvious, is really a whole nother weight to carry as that next generation, because there's a certain amount of like gaslighting too that happens of like, it's not that bad, or what you're experiencing isn't what people before experienced. So I know that myself, I have carried for years that, you know, I should be more grateful. I should not feel the way that I feel. I should not be as affected. And only recently, as I get older and I get wiser and do more healing, I realize that that is the gaslighting. You know, what I experience is my experience, and all of that covert and under the breath, you know, microaggressions, like all the stuff that we are still even like identifying and learning how to name, because there are these new ways of oppression and of being targeted. It really plays a huge psychological effect on you. And then on top of that, you're telling yourself, well, you shouldn't feel this way and you should be grateful and yada, yada. And I think another piece for me is the erasure of culture and the ripping away from roots and my people. And I have an experience because, you know, my mother is from Hungary. So I'm first generation, Hungarian American from her. And, you know, in addition to that, there's been a lot of white assimilation I've experienced in the Black side of my family in the name of survival. And so, you know, in a lot, and I didn't grow up with my Black father in the house. So there was a lot of different ways that culture has been, you know, separated from me and my experience, not only from my mother's culture of being overseas and me not having, you know, too much hands-on connection with that, being, you know, a brown Hungarian that is not common and not necessarily hugely accepted in Hungary. And then, you know, being separated from a lot of my Black culture here in the States, there's so much pain and trauma there that we don't talk about often in society, that is not just a unique experience to me. And the more that I talk about it, and the more that I allow myself to feel the actual repercussions of what that did for me and my life and my identity, the more I hear other people, you know, relating to that and being able to say, yeah, that's actually my experience too, in so many ways. In so many ways, that is the Black experience, you know? And I grew up not realizing how much that is the Black experience, that we've all been ripped from our roots, all been ripped from our culture, and then separated and divided within ourselves. And I experienced so much of that and felt so much gaslighting about that I shouldn't feel that, and that's not happening and it's not important. that silence, you know, eventually, like, you know, if you are familiar with abuse, if you experience abuse so much, you end up just abusing yourself. And so no longer did I need to be silenced because I just silenced myself. Oh, I shouldn't feel that. That's not important. It's not real, you know? And so people didn't have to keep on telling me. I just started telling myself. And you know, it's the awakening to that has opened up so much more understanding that that's not, like I said, that's not just a unique experience that I had by myself, that this is the Black experience. And in so many ways, it is the human experience, you know, and that we've been so ripped away from our roots and our connection with each other that we're walking around numb. We're like losing our senses and our connection with each other, which is what keeps us moving. It's what keeps life progressing, you know? So, you know, in a lot of ways, people have been talking about how the world and our society is deteriorating and degrading. And I think that has a lot to do with that. I think, if you ask me, love is one of the greatest answers right now for people, for our survival. You know, we have to see each other and offer each other love.
Yeah.
Dee, come on in on this.
Thank you for that message that it's love. I think love has always been the answer. We just don't heed that call. So thank you for inserting that and reminding us of it. You know, you talk about the harm, and oftentimes it's difficult to see, particularly in the context of the Valley of Amherst, where there's this myth or impression oftentimes people have that as you make a comparison, as you were saying, how we older folk do that, oh, it used to be so much worse back in the day. But it's to recognize that there's still harm being done and that people still need healing. And particularly the BIPOC community here experiences from what we've been able to gather and have experienced ourselves, you know, different manners of harm. And I know that part of what you shared today and what you've shared with me in different conversations is that you are undertaking projects together and individually to kind of repair that breach, that bridge building that you referred to earlier, DW. Can you both talk about some of these projects that you're undertaking locally to repair the harm in a way that has set in Amherst?
Yeah, I would say first thing I think I want to say is just that, you know, we came back with just big, bright, shiny eyes about wanting to hold the youth here the way that we were not held. And feeling like we wanted to create this, you know, this new way of them being able to feel safe and like they have a space here. And we knew how messy it was here in Amherst because we grew up here. But coming back, I think it was a culture shock all over again, and definitely sobering. The reminder of how deep the trauma is in Amherst, how deeply dysfunctional the community is, especially because there's so much denial of what's really happening here. So lately our focus, I mean, we have been doing some work with some of the youth of BLM and taking on a couple of youth in particular to kind of mentor and help them figure out what they're trying to do. When we were young here, or I should say when I was young here, because we're of sort of different generations. When I was young here, I was a part of all of these different organizations. Emil Kara, you mentioned, I went to school with your son, actually. So I was also a part of Get Up, Get Down when he was there. I did 2050, I did Bomba, I did dance theater. And there's a lot of those things that are still happening in the area. And a lot of the energy around them have shifted. And that was one of the first things that I noticed coming back, is that there wasn't as much vibrant energy moving through the programs the way that I experienced it. And even talking to the youth, I got that same impression. So our focus has been working with particular youth to help them identify what it is that they're wanting to do and how do we help them accomplish that, because they don't have those same kind of programs to go through that we had when we were young. And so I don't know if you want to talk more about the work that we're doing with them, or.
Well, I wanted to just as a scope to bring it back there. Like when we came here, the work was, we're going to, as people, we're going to set up something. We're going to set up a heartbeat here where people don't want to leave. Mm-hmm. That was what we're going to come like, why don't we want to be in Amherst? Oh, there's no Black young professionals there. Right. And when I say like, there's no darker young professionals there. So this is the scope of like BIPOC people. We're not seeing ourselves in this community. And there's a reason why. Right. So you have to investigate those reasons. Right. But beyond that is, we can sit here and go back and forth as to reason why the town and the people are so committed to keeping people out. Or we can just go about doing things that we want to do, how we want to do them. Mm-hmm. Right. And so when we came here for Counter Culture Educator, because when a system is so in place where you don't even have a community center that supports Black and brown people, you're committed to racism. Mm-hmm. Right. There's no way around it, because when you don't have a place where people are like, I'm gonna go here, even there's no place for anyone to go. And what we talk about, what was so important when we talk about art growing up, and your experience, your son's experience, was that there was something that they had that was paired with their education. Mm-hmm. And most of the learning that we did, were in affirming spaces, right? So me seeing somebody, so the first time, and I'm gonna paint this picture, when I was in 2050, one of the classes I walked into was the art of emceeing, and it was taught by Camila Forbes. And Camila Forbes is a Howard graduate, right? And she looked like me. Mm-hmm. And I walked in and I was like, oh, I'm about to walk in here and do this or whatever. And then I saw Camila Forbes and I was like, oh my gosh, it just changed my life. And then this person was telling me about experiences and teaching me about experiences that I had never experienced before. And then I met B-Girl Rockefeller, who I still speak to now. These people I still speak. I wound up interning at the Hip Hop Theater Festival for Camila Forbes. And Camila Forbes is now, has done work on HBO, has done work, and is now the artistic director of the Apollo Theater. I would have never been able to see how far I could go had not that person sat in front of me, had they not been delivered from an organization that said, you know what, we need this. We're going to create this affirming space. And to deny whole communities that is an act of violence. Mm-hmm. And that's what I'm talking about. We're talking about violence. It's so inherent that you can't even see it. And that is dangerous, right? So how do we, when we talked about coming back, Counter Culture Educator, counter to the culture of violence.
Ooh.
Right.
So when we come here, how do we create affirming spaces that give people what they need? And so it's like, I could work with the community, but you've shown me time and time again, you're not interested in me.
Yes. And that I think is referring back to what I was saying when we first got here. And when I said we were big, bright, starry eyes, is because we realized after the first few years, it reminded us, or I guess it solidified for us, that working within the institutions is not where we need to be, because there is a whole lot of restriction and hurdles and toxicity, especially, that exists there, that doesn't really allow for us to do our best work because we're so outside of, or we're so into, rather, going counter to the culture. And so it became more clear to us as we started to allow ourselves to build those boundaries and allow ourselves to be like, yeah, okay, well, if this is what it means to be a part of the education or the institution, then we're going to have to step away from that. And once we allowed ourselves to do that, we realized that the methodologies and the mentality that we've been working with could really support the people who are working within institutions and who are wanting to make big change in areas that it seems impossible. Maybe we were not meant to be there because there needs to be a step in between, right? So that we can protect the parts of us that are envisioning to something different. Because when you're inside of the institution, it's so difficult to see that there's any other way of being than the way that you're being forced to be. You know, and so we had to take a step outside, and that's when we, like I said, we came in with the passion of the youth, especially reflecting on our own experiences. Because when DW says wanting to make a space here where people want to stay and want to give back to the community, they feel supported by the community, so they want to support the community back. We didn't experience that, and nobody that I know who grew up here experienced that. I do not know one person who grew up here who feels that way. And that, I think, really speaks to the dysfunction that's happening overall. And we realized, okay, we can't just focus on the youth. This needs to be something where we're supporting people who are making change, make that change. Because it's a ripple effect. Everything is included. And that's how I got involved with the co-op, the Common Share Food Co-op, because I kept hearing, you know, a friend and a neighbor of mine talk about this co-op and how they're going to make change in Amherst, and they have this anti-racist, you know, mission, and they want to do art, you know, stuff with the artists in the area and with creators and business owners and the farmers. And I was like, that sounds amazing. And who's involved? You know, and I look at the member ownership, and I see almost nobody that I recognize, you know, and there's like nobody that I know who's on the board. And I grew up here. How did I grow up here? And I know all these people here, and I'm not recognizing any of these names. That feels like maybe we're not rooted to the community the way that we think we are. And that just felt so much like the Amherst I grew up in that I didn't feel welcome and included into. That didn't feel like it was an anti-racist space. So that started to ring a bell to me. That was like, okay, this is one of those moments where Amherst is doing that thing where we're like, we're gonna make change, we're gonna make everyone feel great, and everything's gonna be great. And we're not even seeing the way that we're just replicating the harm over again. And how do we see that when the people who are doing it are just ingrained in their way of being? And that's one of my biggest, you know, what I try to do in every situation is understand that everyone has their story. You know, like I imagine white guilt is extremely painful and difficult to experience. And I think a lot of Black folks don't have the patience to think that way because we're so exhausted. And also there is a certain amount of like, okay, so this is really hard for you. How do I hold space for that so we can kind of move forward together, because we all need a little bit of empathy to move forward to the next step, you know? And so like when I come into the co-op, I understand, you know, y'all are trying to do good things here. There's good intention. Okay. So what's missing? You know, why isn't the whole community feeling this? Why doesn't the whole community feel inspired and excited about this? There's something missing. And I think we have to have patience for people in uncovering that, because it's uncomfortable. In difficult dialogues, y'all know it's uncomfortable to talk about. And people are not used to being uncomfortable, especially in a place like Amherst, where we act like everything is okay. And we don't like to have that conversation that people are running for the hills. But people are running for the hills, you know? You know, and this is something that just gets me fired up, because like I said, I've had so many friends and loved ones who have literally run for the hills from Amherst. Amazing people are being raised up out of this town. And why don't they want to come back and give back to this community? I don't know one person who's like, yeah, I want to come do something for Amherst.
Right.
That's problematic. You know, yeah.
So I like wanted to add about the crippling effect of white guilt.
Yeah.
And you know,
right, the myth of the Happy Valley, exactly.
Right. So the way that that shows up and people, and the way it's showing up now, like even I get messages daily from people I know, from people who are identified as white in the world, message me daily. Hi, how are you? But we weren't having conversations just 6 months ago.
Right.
I wasn't on your mind. So your white guilt is like, I need to check in. And this is my thought. We know that it's for right now, is some of my friends, my Black friends, are saying to me, if you find me somewhere missing, know that I did not want to go.
Right.
These are the messages that people are saying. Like, if someone says I committed suicide, know that I am not feeling suicidal.
Right.
But these are the messages literally that are happening. And like, these are the experiences that are being captured, if not by us, by our friends who are in Milwaukee, in Minnesota, who are speaking on these experiences. And, you know, the feeling of the people that I know, the white people that I know that are scrambling right now, trying to figure out, like, what do we do? What do we do? What do we do? And my thought is, my thought about that, I'm trying to bring that back, is if we made it about healing, about how to heal from whiteness, if white people made it their business to heal, and all of us, just like all of us made it our business to heal, because we're oppressing each other, and that oppression stems from another place, right? So it stems from the oppression of whiteness. So if we made it our business to heal, we'd be too busy healing to oppress, right? And so it's not about, like, when we talk about, like, I don't hate white people, right? Like, and when I talk about whiteness, they're separate, right? I don't have hatred in my heart, right? And I don't have a seeking revenge. I'm not seeking any of those things, but I understand the fear that can come from whiteness of people who only know that. They only know revenge. They only know harm. So they can't even imagine what it would be like to sit and have a conversation with me and me to be totally okay. Like, I'm good. And I'm gonna let you know, just do your work. Do your work so we can all move. Right? So it's just like that holy undoing of yourself. And that's to say, if we want to talk about progress, we gotta talk about white healing.
Yeah.
Because it's the people who are doing the oppressing, if they heal, then we don't have this situation. Right? It starts to evolve into something that we can imagine together.
Thank you. I just want to make 2 comments and then a question, particularly to let folks know that we'll put the website for Counter Culture. It's a Facebook page. So folks could get in touch with you if they're interested in your work. And then also for the food co-op, they can buy shares in the food co-op. If you want to give us a little on that, and then I'm going to close out with a question here as we bring it to an end. I found out recently that you all are being recognized for a video project that you are involved with, and it's part of the official selection for the 2020 virtual Atlanta Black Pride. So if you could talk a little bit about that, your video project called Recognizing My Humanity, which, as I understand, is also about healing. But before that, if you could tell us about the food co-op and buying shares. Thank you.
Yeah. Can I just say something?
Yeah.
All right. I want to mention that Counter Culture Educator officially became an LLC in July of 2020 because of donations that people gave to our GoFundMe account. And I want to say the reason why our website is not up yet is because we are still generating, because of the funds that people are giving us to create Counter Culture Educator, we're using those funds to create branding and support the building of the website. So we're in the process of doing that right now. So we want to thank the community for supporting us, and also offer to the community, if you would like to continue to support, we would be grateful for that as well. Mm-hmm. So sharing the link, we have an Instagram page at Counter Culture Educator, where you can it links to our GoFundMe, where people can donate to support us getting the business up and running, because that's our focus right now, focusing on the infrastructure. And I just wanted to put that out there so people knew we are moving towards a website. That's where we're working at right now, and we're still wanting to create some sort of revenue stream so that we can build that up.
Yes, website is coming, and that link for the GoFundMe is also on the Facebook page. So you can find us at Counter Culture Educator either on Facebook or on Instagram. And for the Common Share Food Co-op, same, you can find us on Instagram and Facebook. And our website is commonsharefood.coop. And that's where you can find the link to, or the page to sign up as a member owner, or you can purchase some partial share for somebody else to become a member owner if you want to gift to our funded shares. Both are available, and we're almost at 700. Last I heard, we were at 699 member owners. So we need to get to 1,000 to get prepared to open up our store. We are still in, we took a pause for a moment once COVID started to go back to our foundation and our systems of operating. Like I told you all, I've done some work in operations and systems. So that was something that was really important as I stepped into the board presidency role to support us and making sure that stuff is really super clear, because we're about to open a whole grocery store. It's a huge business. It's a big undertaking. And so just as we're getting closer to the final stages, we're really excited to be making our systems and processes really clear and powerful so we can serve the community properly.
That is really amazing. Thank you, DW, for talking about the GoFundMe as well, which I think we've given to both of them, the Shabazes. So we're so glad you all are in the community and doing the good work that you all are doing. And Kinga, with the shares, I did not know it was, so you're heading towards a store. Yes. And opening a store, which is really important. People they really don't think of Amherst as kind of, I guess, a food desert, they call it. But for people,
I started to call it a food apartheid because my friend over at Gem City Market, Amaha Selassie, really clarified and reminded me that this is not some, nature-built situation where there was no food here and we were put into this situation with no food. That there were actual systems and laws created that make it difficult for us to access food, that make it that there is not food accessible here in the area. So I've been using the term food apartheid.
I think that actually works well here, because if you think about it, folks who either have chosen not to have a vehicle or do not have a vehicle, they have to get on the bus, and the bus, I think there's a limit with how much you can carry back and forth from, shopping. So there's this inconvenience and difficulty and challenges for folks in certain places in Amherst, and people just don't think about that.
Right. Well, and I think that, just going back into that, I think the part that's really important there that we've been looking at a lot is that the reason why people are not as aware of it is because there is a huge separation between the economic stability in Amherst. So the classes are just wildly divided. And there are people who have the ability to get into their car and go shop wherever they want, which, mind you, is usually outside of the town of Amherst. Mm-hmm. But there are a whole lot of people who don't have that ability, and there's a large population in Amherst that's living in poverty, and the bus systems are very limited, and if you look at the actual area of Amherst, like I said, there aren't really a lot of grocery stores in Amherst, and the ones that are available might not always have the freshest produce, are really expensive, and it's not accessible for people when you really look at the situation. And that's part of the challenge with Amherst, is that there is so much segregation and there's so much divide and there's so much extreme, you know?
It's just to say that that also is a choice. It's a choice, like to have, to not have a way for people to have access to food.
Right.
That you're choosing not to uplift your community. Because if I'm 36 and I went to Crocker Farm Elementary School and there was no way for my family to have groceries unless they had found a taxi or a ride. And, you know, my mother had five children. Mm-hmm. So we're not eating unless we're eating honey buns from up the street. So that's my reality, right, of being here, living here. And so there's no, when people come to me, when anybody from Amherst on the town council and all that stuff come and talk about, we want to change, I ain't got time for that BS. Because if you did, it would be done. And that's when we do programming, when we want it done, it's done. It's not about, oh, what will this and this and this. Which way do we have to go to get there? Mm-hmm. There's a need, let's make it happen. And I'm not going to sit here and like beg people to meet the need. We're going to create Counter Culture Educator, and we're going to move with the community for the people who want to move together. And then we're going to create sustainability for ourselves, because nobody is coming to save us. And I just want to be very clear about that. It's very clear that we need to be doing stuff for ourselves and getting up and activating and supporting the people who are activating and doing the activation, because nobody's coming to save us, because if they were interested, it would already be done. Mm-hmm.
Thank you for that, DW. So we're gonna close out in a few minutes. I do want to hear about your video project, and that's receiving some accolades. If you could talk about it a little bit.
Right. So recognizing my humanity was a piece. I had an idea. Well, I had an injury. I was suffering from an injury, and I was going through a really tough, painful transition out of a job within the institutions. And so it was like this transition of getting out of the institution, and how painful it didn't have to be, but it became because people were committed to making it painful, right? And so a part of my releasing that, a part of me stepping into the healing that needed to happen, this project came to be. And so not only did it capture the moments of me separating from the institution, but it captured all of the moments that were held of the institutions. In a way, for me, I feel like it captured all of that, and the fact that I had been traveling in these places and asked to be in service to so many people, because that was the expectation. My Blackness was an expectation for me to be in service to others. And how was I able to come out of that and understand that I was enough? I am enough. And so the project, for me, being able to be in my body and get up again, when there were literally physically things that wouldn't allow me to walk again in the same way. And then I was able to get up and figure out how to rediscover who I am in my own healing. And so that is what recognizing my humanity is about, is essentially me being able to recognize my humanity. And most of the projects that we've done thus far, Kinga really does a good job of editing. So if there's an idea that's happening in my head and like, I need it to be right here, I usually ask Kinga to come in and do the edits. But I think it is really important, because people always recognize the face of a project, but they may not recognize the work that happens behind it. And so a lot of the projects that are on Counter Culture Educator, a lot of those conceptually, there's parts that I play, and there are parts that Kinga plays, right? And so she may not have been the concept of the video, but she was the person who was rubbing my leg in order for me to get up and do it, right? And I think that that's very important, right? Into making sure that this was streamed in the way that it needs to be. You got to get up and do your video. You said you were going to work on it today. When I was feeling like I couldn't, Kinga was the one who was telling me to get up. Oh, you need to get these edits in? I'm gonna do these edits, when I was too tired because I was healing because my Achilles was hurting.
Yeah.
Right. So,
but truly, this is a project that is mostly of DW's conceptualization and creation. And I would say the largest role that I had was that this project came in a moment when I spoke earlier today in our conversation about how we realized that being in the institution was not the place for us, and that there was so much threat, I'm going to say, that was involved with being there, that was like crushing the part of our spirits that create the light that we create and that the world needs from us. We started to realize that as we started to go deeper into our healing and commit more to ourselves. We started to realize how important that was. And in that process was also while DW was in their deep in their injury, in their healing, in tremendous loss in lots of different areas, and in a place where there were a lot of people around them that were not holding them up in their need, in their time of need of this dramatic healing. I mean, you're tearing your Achilles is huge because it's not just your leg, you can't put any pressure on it. You can't put any pressure on your Achilles. It's extremely sensitive. It takes a long time to heal. So it disrupted our household wildly. And then they tore it twice. So it became a very disrupting moment in our lives. And there was a lot that came to light about the ways that we were not treating ourselves well enough by building boundaries around us that allow us to survive and even more so thrive. And so during that time, while DW was going through their healing and feeling hopeless, I kept reminding them of their ability to create and tell their story through creation. And so I believe during those first 6 months to even a year, there was different ideas that started to pop up, but that project came towards the end of that year and really was an accumulation of all of those different pieces of their humanity being stripped and not being acknowledged or even protected and held when in a time of real need, whether that be within the institution, whether that be within the systems that are meant to protect us, whether that be within community. There was so many different ways in which your humanity was being stripped. And that's the experience that I had with you. And that's where that project was birthed. Mm-hmm.
Thank you for the share of all of this. I hope that as this airs on all the different platforms, Amherst Media channels, YouTube, Facebook, wherever else, that your GoFundMe just blows up, or even that people come and say, hey, let me invest some shares, and things just really blow up for both of you. We got you back here, and we believe in this. This is the way to our liberation. Since the murders of Breonna Taylor, of George Floyd, and even a few years before that with Trayvon Martin and the acquittal of his murderer, which is really where this difficult dialogue series started. We have really seen that we've got to continue to have these kinds of conversations and bring forth these messages, because this is not the harm we're talking about isn't ending on its own. The damage isn't repairing itself on its own. It takes work. It takes money. As we would say for a long time back, freedom ain't free. So I just would I invite you all to take the last word on connecting this all to the work of reparative justice, the struggle for reparations. Like you say, we center that work as about Black folk and about the hundreds of years of anti-Black oppression. through slavery, through Jim Crow, but that we understand this reparative work is everybody. The whole planet is involved. That, you know, if we can't begin by repairing the harm in our own human ecosystems, you know, we're not going to get out there to the larger ecosystems of climate change and preserving our environment for future generations to be able to live. So I just give you all the space to kind of close us out here on this difficult dialogue any way that you all want to connect in with the call for reparations, the struggle for reparations.
I think before I even want to say anything about that, I just want to give a huge gratitude to the two of you. We've spoken about this many times before, and this just feels affirmed so much in this conversation right now. But I don't recall having elders in my life like you all ever. Woo, getting emotional. But it's like, it's so deep and so needed to have elders who are willing to see you and hold you in wherever you are at, and affirm the new wave of wherever we're going. I spoke earlier about how that dysfunctional relationship can happen between generations and the comparison, and to have elders who are willing and ready to see a new wave, or to be able to welcome in the perspective of a new generation and just be affirming and appreciative of that. It seems so simple, but it's just something I haven't experienced. It's something I haven't experienced, not much in my lifetime, and especially not here in Amherst. And so I feel that this is a part of something really huge. Even just our relationship with you all right now feels really huge, that we're starting to build that repair, and we're starting to build that community just together. And I'm just really appreciative of not only you all and the work you've been doing, but also you all reaching out to us and welcoming us in to your arms, because not having experienced that, after a while, you know, like, you just don't feel comfortable approaching people and opening up that way. So I mean, that's just something I needed to say and get off of my chest. Yeah.
I mean, I want to add to that, and this is something that we do we started to do on Counter Culture Conversations with the homies, is the gift giving. And just to keep the energy, to let people know this is the energy that we're working with, right? And when we talk about love, we mean it. We mean a radical love. And I want to extend the gifts from Kinga and myself to the both of you. And I'm going to start it by saying, what I ask is that, and I teach this with young people, and I got this from actually Palante, sitting in circle with Palante, and I really loved it. So I added it to my repertoire when I do work. And I tell the people in the circle to imagine in your hand that there's a gift of word that you can pass to the person sitting next to you. And the words that you would give them would help them move through their day, or maybe even through their week if you don't see them again. But it's something that you wish for them. You wish something that is of love. And what kind of gift would that be? And so then I say, imagine. So for me, I'm going to imagine the gift that I want to give Amilcar right now, the gift of word. And then I'm going to ask Kinga to imagine the gift that she would want to give to Dee. Right? And then once you imagine that word, I'm imagining it right now. And I tell the people in the circle to put it in your hand. And when you imagine it, you close your hand. So let me give the word. So now that I have my word and I've imagined the gift that I want to give to Amilcar right now, what we would do in the circle is I would say it, and as I would say it, when I was done, I would pass it into your hand. So I'm going to wish for you the gift of sustainability. And what I mean by sustainability is that you're able to always recognize how much that you are sustaining a lot of us in the work that you do. And you're able to recognize that the sustainability has created so much joy and love and faith and courage for people. So I want to give you the gift of sustainability so you remember that that's what you bring into our community.
Should I share now? D, I would like to give you the gift of appreciation, because the way that you hold the people around you and the way that you dedicate yourself selflessly to our community and to all the different projects that you're connected to is so inspiring. And I hope with everything inside of me that you feel the appreciation, because I think that maybe we're not telling you enough how much you're offering and how much you're appreciated. And I hope that with that appreciation, you take some breaths, some rest, and give yourself some of that energy that you've been offering the rest of us.
Thank you to you both. That was beautiful. And I don't think we could have ended it any better. And what a blessing to have you two. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Reparations now.
Yeah.